This video is brought to you by Game Maker, the free, fast, and easy-to-use 2D game engine that helps power modern classics like Undertale, Hotline Miami, and Hyper Light Drifter. Starter templates, official asset bundles, and a wealth of tutorials are available to help bring your ideas to life. And you can export and share your game for free on all non-console platforms. But you don't have to take my word for it, I'm just some jerk. We have an actual bona fide Game Maker on hand.
Oh shit, that's me. Yes, I've been using Game Maker for a long time. It's probably the most powerful and easiest to use engine for making 2D games out there, suitable for both amateurs and hardcore coders, and with all the Steam and console integration stuff for when you're ready to start monetizing your hobbies. I used it to make my recently released game, Starstruck Vagabond, which has already delighted thousands of sci-fi cozy game aficionados, thanks to Game Maker being so bloody great.
Head on over to the Game Maker link in the description to begin your game development journey today.
Hello, and welcome to Dev Heads, the podcast focused on the ins, outs, and goings-on of game dev with hosts experience ranging from indie, double to AAA. I'm Jay, as usual, joined by my wonderful co-host Tina.
Hello, how's it going?
And a picture of Mikey.
Hello, I'm a picture of Mikey. Apologies, everybody, if I'm having some technical difficulties. You're just going to have to stare at my mug from some years ago for a little bit.
You're so young, dude. You're so young.
Is it that big of a difference? Oh, no.
No. It looks
I didn't know I
great.
aged that much from game dev.
And you've got like this depth of field, like the back rooms background as well. It's very spooky. I like it. And today we have a very special guest, a guest that I've wanted on the show for a very long time, Mr. Mark Brown.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no worries, dude.
Mark.
So for audiences let's say the 0.5% of our audience that do not know who you are, can you introduce yourself, what you're about, where you're from?
So people probably know me best from my YouTube channel, Game Maker's Toolkit, which is all about game design. So if you like design delve, then you probably will like my stuff too. And from doing that, I have branched out into various different things. So I've done, that's me talking about magnets. I've done the GMTK Game Jam every year now for a while. And this is my latest endeavor, which is just like, okay, let's see what it's like to actually make one of these things, making my own game over the course of like 3 years of trying to do every step of the way and show people what it's like in a very transparent way to make your own Steam game and then release it and maybe make another one in the future, or just go, that was enough, to be honest.
How did you find that overall experience after diving in, not just with the insane documentation and educational side, which I can massively commend, but from a development space? You said it took 3 years, right?
Yeah, I mean, it took like physical time 3 years, but I was, one of the things I really struggled with was juggling making the game and doing the YouTube channel.
Oh yeah.
I'm a very sort of one-track mind type of person, so I'm either like just thinking about magnets all day long, or I'm working on the video and I just cannot get back to game dev. So I took these like massive breaks. There's like a funny video where I'm like, I'm super excited to get back into the game and get it done, and then like 6 months go past before I make another video. So I'm just like, the real development time was, I calculated around sort of like 16 months, which is just because there's been 16 episodes of developing, and each one is about a month's worth of work. So yeah, but that was kind of one of the main challenges, was actually just knuckling down and getting it done while also trying not to lose my main source of income on YouTube.
Yeah, that's something I can sympathize with as someone who is juggling, full-time YouTube game dev stuff while also working on indie projects in my free time. It's a difficult, woe is us for having, some of the most sought-after jobs in the world, but it is difficult to juggle these things that I'm very similar with the one-track mind. I can only really think of one thing at a time. And it is difficult to juggle these things as, not to speak for you, but we're so passionate about both of these things, and it's hard to not give them both 100% focus, but then, they feed off of each other. And that's how you get to that space. So like for you, what was it that, and this is the kind of crux of this episode, the kind of topic we're going to be focusing on. What was it for you that was that spark to be like, let's do this, right? Because we all have that moment. And what was that for you?
For me, it was kind of a weird moment, which was that I had at the beginning of 2020, I realized that I was getting kind of close to getting 1 million subscribers on YouTube. And I'm like, I'm going to really focus this year on like, that's my goal for this year is to get to 1 million subscribers. I worked really hard on it and I'm tracking my numbers and, you know, every day thinking about what type of videos. And I get there in November and I reach that goal. It's fantastic. And then like the day after, I'm like, I don't know what to do with my life now. Like just completely like, and it took me a while to figure it out. And I was just like, you know, trying different video ideas and maybe I should just like quit YouTube. It was a very strange thing to like have this sort of crisis about this job I love. And then it was like, oh, a thing I could do and something I've always kind of wanted to do is to make my own video game. And it's something that I've been putting off. I mean, this is like a sort of very weird, very personal, exclusive thing of like having this YouTube channel where I'm talking about game design and sort of giving people best practices and saying what makes good game design. And then to be like, okay, I'm going to make my own game. People are suddenly like, okay, let's see how good this guy actually is at all this stuff he's been saying. Let's see him put his money where his mouth is. So there was quite a lot of fear with that of what if I failed spectacularly and my game was absolutely terrible. So that certainly put me off. But it was just like, I suddenly realized that that's not a good enough reason to not do this thing that I've wanted to do all my life. And it's, you know, there's so many amazing tools, as I'm sure we'll talk about for making games now. It's like, there's no better time than right now. So let's start making it.
100%. Yeah, this
good for you, Mark. Yeah, that does take a lot of. First of all, thanks for sharing that, of course. But also, you took the plunge, man. You're right. You're kind of under a lens. They look at this guy and they go, all right, he's finally going to do it. Let's see. And it's not exactly like people are going to be super forgiving, right? They're going to be as critical as they are with any project, right? And then some because of who you are.
Yeah, I mean, it was actually kind of a funny mix. It was anyone who has made a game before, actually, it has been very forgiving and very kind and also just sort of can see themselves in all of the mistakes I've made and the troubles I've run into and, you know, the struggles. They're like, oh, yeah, I've totally, you know, had those terrible playtesting sessions or I've, you know, forgotten to do this type of prototyping, whatever. Anyone who hasn't made a game, they're the ones who are being very critical and they're like, I can't believe you've made all these stupid mistakes. It's so, it seems so obvious, you know, and it's sort of, it's funny.
Yeah,
that's true. That's very true.
The lens is difficult. I'm going to be saying this a lot, Mark, and to the audience, sorry if you get sick of this. I can sympathize with that a lot as someone who's also doing the game dev YouTube stuff. There's a lot of this, you know, people who don't work on games who come in like, well, who are you to say what works well in here and what doesn't and stuff. Like, regardless of my, you know, uni education background and stuff like that, there's a lot of questioning there. And because I focused so intently on the YouTube education side, I haven't been able to release my first games. I'm in the midst of, you know, making them now. And there's this, I don't want to say horror, but there's this anxiety of like, put your money where your mouth is, right? Like if you're going to criticize and praise all of these other projects and dive directly into why they're good, can you do it? Like, are you missing that special sauce? And I mean, like, I will say, not to blow smoke up your ass, like your game's really, really good and you succeeded in that. I hope one day to release something and, you know, half as good as that. But it's one thing educating people on game dev and it's another thing putting things into practice. So first of all, like, what engine did you use to work on the game?
So it's all made in Unity. And the you know, it was definitely something I thought about when I was working on the game. You know, I had a wealth of choices in front of me. I'd done a little bit of Game Maker in the past, and I'd done a little tiny bit of stuff in like just writing code and Doer and things. And obviously, Godot hadn't really like it's a real sort of blow up moment since then.
Like a renaissance,
exactly. Yeah, it was definitely like in consideration at the time. The main reason I picked Unity was just how popular it is and how that afforded it so many tutorials and so many people who already have used it and can like help me out. So it's just like, because game dev is quite daunting, it's like I want to go in a well-trodden path that a lot of people are already there and can help me out. Whereas at the time, like, you know, you'd search Godot tutorials on YouTube or on Google, and there was just not that much out there.
Yeah.
So that was a big thing.
Luckily, that's shifted quite a lot nowadays. I heard someone describe Godot as the Blender of game engines, which I can really see that. And I'm glad it's taking that huge uptick. Was there the idea of, like, you were talking about tutorials with Unity, and the educational side of it? Do you think there may have been a thought process of, well, like, here's the question: how early on did you realize that you wanted to document the process?
Oh, that was like, well, that was pretty much built in from the beginning. I mean, there was like a slight thought towards the start where it's like, I could just do this all in secret, and then like, if the game's good, I'll tell everyone I made it, and if it sucks, then I won't, and all of that sort of thing. And there was also, like, as I discussed in the most recent video I put out, like, I've wanted this whole series to be very transparent and to show people what it's like to make a game, but at the same time, my experience is quite weird and unique to me, and has all these advantages from doing GMTK, and like, I don't need to market my game in the same way that other people do. And so there was kind of this thought of like, oh, I could make the game in secret so I could see what it's like to be a real indie dev. But at the end of the day, I just decided that the benefits of showing the process at every step of the way, like, outweighed those sort of other aspects of it. So it was like, yeah, I want to do this in public, as painful as that might be.
And while it is personally painful, I have to imagine there's some great advantages there too, right? You have a whole audience you have a truly unique situation, right? Like, I guess in a literal sense, there are other people who do tutorials for game development in some way, and then they go and they make a project and they can share. But there's probably like less than 12 of you, I feel like, around the world. So I'm curious to hear about, like, what are some ways you made the vulnerable plunge, right? What are some ways that you decided, all right, well, here's how I'm going to take advantage of my situation?
Yeah, I mean, in quite a few different ways. I mean, one was, I've got all these, you know, famous indie developers who know my stuff, and I can ask them for advice. You know, when I made the like character controller for my game, like, I spent like a whole month just tweaking all those stats, and it was nice to be able to send it to Noel Berry, who made is one half of the Celeste developers, and be like, what do you think of this character controller? Like, not many indie devs get that experience to be able to like reach out like that. Having just direct access to the developers at Unity when I run into problems is always nice. Another thing is, like, I talk so much on my series about like playtesting. It's so important. You've got to playtest your games as much as possible. And the feedback I get from people is like, I find it so hard to find playtesters. And that was never a problem for me. I had too many playtesters, so I was having to like sift through hundreds of them. So that was like a very strange thing. And then just the marketing side of things, like, that is the one aspect that I really just cannot talk about on my channel, that most indie devs are, you know, it's the biggest struggle, is just like, how do I get people to know my game even exists? And that wasn't a problem for me. So I'm just gonna like leave that to other people to discuss, because it's so outside my very strange and fortuitous experience.
Yeah, it's important to recognize that privilege, right? Like that kind of aspect.
Yeah, so much of game development, I'm curious to hear. This makes me want to kind of go off on a slight tangent. I wonder how it works with all of our different production scales, like how much time is spent on a project leveraging the network to get other people's opinion. I know in the indie and AA space, and even AAA, like, there's a ton of that. I feel like it, in my experience, happened the least with like my stint with high production AAA type projects. AA a lot more, but then probably the most indie. I'm curious if Tina and Jay, that's been your guys' experience, or if that's consistent. I'm specifically talking about like leveraging your network, right? Being like, I'm going to go to somebody outside this company for help.
I see. Just to get game advice, or just general shooting the shit?
Advice on the project. Well, I guess I mean in a more direct sense of like, hey, I'm trying to figure out my player controller, and here's something I'm trying to do. What do you think, or is there a better way to do this?
Yeah. So in AAA, I know that a lot of, I don't know what you call them, brother or sister studios will do that, right? Like knowledge sharing. So if like at Sony, Bungie was sharing knowledge about how to manage multiple projects at once in Perforce with like Santa Monica Studio, for instance. So there's like, folks talking back and forth in that sense, only because they're all from the same corporate entity. But there's not much on the AAA side of devs reaching out to other devs at other studios that aren't necessarily financially tied in some way. If it is, it's very casual, like at a GDC or an E3, just like discussing like, hey, this rendering bug I hit in Unreal, blah, But there's not much deep diving into like how to solve something, I don't think, because there's just some weird liabilities there when you do that.
Yeah, there's a lot of red tape that you have to deal with,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that definitely makes sense. Yeah.
So in AAA, it's not as well, I the one
The
example I can
sister
think
studio, or sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
of, when I was working on Apex Legends, we were playtesting almost every day, actually every day. We did consult. Well, we asked for outside help from a non-game dev. We reached out to Shroud, who's a YouTube streamer or Twitch streamer. I apologize. I'm old. And he came in and we play tested before the game was even done. And we got some pretty cool feedback watching him play. And I think that happens more often now with shooters in general. Like I think Shroud was used for X Defiant as well.
Oh, I think you might be thinking of Spectre Divide. He was involved with the Spectre Divide development.
Was he? Yeah.
Yeah.
He's
Or
probably
maybe, you know
into
what?
a ton of stuff now.
No, you know what? You're probably right. He was probably helping X Defiant too. I think a lot of people leverage content creators like that for at least like an advisory thing, just like you guys did. But I do know that he was more explicitly involved with the development of Spectre Divide.
Yeah. I mean, Mark, like you probably have a golden opportunity to help out other studios in that same way.
Yes, I've been lucky enough to do that. Yeah, it's been a nice thing. I mean, it's like one of my sort of favorite ones to do was the Sackboy, a big adventure game from Sumo Digital.
Oh, yeah.
They're working on this game. They like my stuff. They wanted me to come in, and I played through the game and we talked about it. And the main thing they wanted was just like, they're like, we're so close to this game. We've been playing it, every day for years.
Yeah.
We have no idea if it's good anymore. We just want someone whose opinion we can kind of trust to just give us, a thumbs up, thumbs down, and some areas that we can to look at. So yeah, consultancy is a very cool thing. And that probably is like somewhat exclusive to the AAA space just because it's, can be expensive. It's not something an indie dev maybe is able to do. But yeah, it's interesting.
I feel like that happens in the indie space, and why I think I said it in one of the earliest episodes we did of Dev Heads, of that I feel indie is a lot more collaborative and freeform, is mainly because the teams are so small that not only do you become numb to your own project in the sense of, is it good, is it bad, like how are we looking at it? Sometimes you do need that help, and having friends in that space, like I've been very fortunate because of my job to meet and effectively study under some of my favorite developers. One of my favorites was we were making a documentary with Sabotage on Sea of Stars, and getting to go out for lunch with them and just talking to their lead level designer about the level designs I was doing in the project I'm working on. And being able to bounce those ideas off. And he was a dev who worked on all of the OG Prince of Persia games, some of my favorite games of all time. He's like a hero of mine. Just getting to sit down, tell him my ideas that I'd been, creating in isolation, and having them bounce them back, with mostly praise, but some criticism. So I know they weren't just trying to wave me off, right? It gives you this new sense of confidence in like, okay, well, like Mark said, I trust this person's opinion. They're giving me the data I need to move forward, or just direct tips, right? There's lots. Well, I can't really speak about them because they're like under lock and key for sabotage stuff. But like getting to see the inner workings of how their stuff works gives me ideas on like, oh, that was a really interesting way of doing that. I'd love to do something similar. And indie devs are way more willing. I guess not willing. They're allowed to more freely speak. There isn't that red tape like Tina speaks of with in AAA. You don't have to go through 10 different channels. You just discuss. And every game dev I've ever met is just so unbelievably eager to just gush about the thing they're making and like the art they're creating. And it's intoxicating. Like it's infectious. And that's what makes me, going back to like when do you take that leap? Visiting these devs, seeing them is that push that it's like, okay, well, these ideas that I have, these games that I've been formulating in my head for years, I can do them, right? As long as I can manage my time correctly with YouTube stuff and everything else, it's doable. Like, I'm very fortunate enough to have the network around me to be able to reach out and discuss and, you know, get these things made. It's very unique. But yeah, the difference between indie, double, and AAA is very interesting, because I'm sure, Tina, like, what's the process like in AAA when a new project idea is being floated around, or like with indie, and even like sometimes a double, you can be like, this is a cool idea, let's prototype it, let's move forward, right? But is it a little bit more, like you said, red tapey at AAA? Yeah.
Yes, when you have a new game idea, it's usually spearheaded by somebody already decided within the studio as like the game director or studio head, right? So it may not be theirs necessarily that kind of kickstarted the idea, but they're driving it. So you kind of hand off like whatever ideas you have. Usually, if it's a AAA game, it's some sort of prototype that someone already made in the engine and tools that you already have at your disposal, and your previous game was already either released, or, you know, you're managing a live game while also trying to create the new thing. And there's sort of financial gates that you have to go through in AAA. In my experience, they've been called like greenlight meetings, right? So you put together your pitch and you present it to your publisher and say, this is the thing we want to make. Here's the characters, here's a story, here's some concept art, here's some environment art, here's just an idea of what we want to run with. And the publisher either says, cool, keep going, or they say, we don't like it, here's some feedback. And it's not necessarily feedback that you can completely ignore, right? And then there's other opportunities where if you're a AAA studio that's well established with a ton of history, making a lot of money for the publisher, they just kind of leave you alone. And the green light is more of like a formality thing where they just come in and say, what are you doing? And then they're like, okay, cool, we don't care, bye. So it's just like, where are we spending our money? And the devs are like, here's where you're spending your money. And they're like, okay, whatever, we're not worried. Yeah.
Have you ever seen a project, like a promising project, be rejected, like in a way that you'd be like, I think the fans and the dev team would have loved to have worked and played this, but the publishers have turned it away for whatever reason?
Yes.
Not in detail. I know you won't be able to say details.
No. I can. Yes, but in the opposite, where the publisher wanted Titanfall 3, the devs were making Titanfall 3. I was hired as a single-player producer for Titanfall 3, and then the devs decided, nah, we're going to do this other thing, and kind of like nixed it. And then we had an uphill battle, a little bit morale-wise within the team, as a wider group, to say, hey, this is why we're pivoting, and also here, publisher, this is why we're doing this. And that was the publisher piece was a constant talk until launch, and even after launch was when they finally accepted that we made Apex Legends.
Do you think that was I'm saying this as someone who loves Titanfall and would have loved Titanfall 3.
Yeah, I played it.
Yeah, right. Do you think that was the right decision? from the team.
You know what's interesting about that group of individuals? I don't think they've ever really done anything in threes. They did, Modern Warfare 1, 2, and then they didn't do 3. They did Titanfall 1 and 2. They didn't do 3. So I don't know if it's like a weird coincidence. It's just not their style. I don't.
It's like
but
it's like Valve as well, right?
I know that this group always chased what was fun at home to play. And I think there's a lot more value in that than doing what's expected of them. But when you do what's expected of you when you're at a certain level in game dev, you can make a lot of money that way too. So, I mean, it all depends. Like, I think a lot of the folks found creative enjoyment out of doing Apex. And I think it was an amazing choice. I mean, like, EA's seems to be doing fine.
Oh no, agreed. Like, it hurts. It physically hurts to say this, but yeah, I think they made the right decision, right? Not just creatively for themselves, because clearly they'd come to that decision beforehand, but also Apex was a huge success and is still seeing continued success, right? Like, way more, not just monetarily and gameplay wise for players, but like that has probably surpassed any kind of numbers that Titanfall 3 probably could have done. So from a business standpoint, I think it was the correct decision. There are lots of fans, me included, that would have loved specifically a single player for Titanfall 3. But hey, you know, sometimes these big decisions need to be made. And it's like talking about that greenlight, right? Having that investment from a publisher or like the go ahead, that's something that's like a different struggle that indies have. But before I ask, you know, Mark and I about, you know, the kind of indie struggles of like what kind of setup do you need to start? Mikey, what's your experience with AA? Like, does it differ to Tina's production?
You mean in terms of starting a new project?
Yeah, like starting a new project, getting that green light. Like, what does that look like for AA?
There's no standard. AA is, I think, for one, it's a vague term, right? But like, as I think we would all probably agree, like within a soft definition of you have between, I don't know, $5 to $15 million, like or 2 or 1 to 15. Like, to me, that's probably AA. I don't really know. Like, it's pretty soft, but AAA to me, I don't see like a $5 to $15 million game and go, oh, look at that AAA game, right? Maybe it looks it, punches above its weight. So first, I guess we have to, as we often do on the show, reconfirm what these terms mean. So if we're talking within that space, I would say it's very team dependent. I've experienced pitch processes a bunch on various projects or with various teams for various projects, and it can really be different. At that point, when you think about it structurally, think about, okay, who creates the pitch process, and it's probably going to be people in leadership, and it comes down to the C-suite, or it comes down to all the different leads getting together and voting for something, or if not explicitly voting, more like just getting some consent and general agreement vibes for the room. But the game director / CEO / creative director, or whoever, has kind of a veto and says like, well, okay, this is a good process, let's do it. It could also just be where the team is aligned and just wants to follow what that creative director / CEO / game director wants to do. There really is no template for it. But I can tell you, like, the thing that I've experienced more than once in AA / indie is the team discusses and everybody gets a chance to say something. So that could include like a formalized pitch where everybody writes up a doc and says, okay, here's my pitch. The game is like this. It's got a little inspiration from here to here. And this is why I think it'll be successful. Maybe here's a little bit of visual reference and stuff, blah, blah, blah. That is all, at least to be very general, one of the ways that I think it's experienced, where I guess to put it more simply, it's just a little more democratized than AAA would be, I think. AAA, I'm sure you guys have your templates and processes for, hey, here's how your voice can be heard. But when you're a smaller group of humans, you're going to be way more likely to be actually heard and to have an opportunity to get your pitch like read, to flesh it out. Right? But yeah, again, it's very tough. That's like a lot of game development is studio dependent. That part,
Yeah.
especially in Indie and AA, is extremely studio dependent.
Yeah, for sure. 100%.
Then we can talk about
my
Mark's
thoughts.
process and the indie
Yeah.
process, which is just, I'll do whatever the hell I want, damn it.
Yeah, well, I think that's kind of the way it goes. I think for a lot of like true indie where it's just like a person making a video game, yeah, I don't think they sort of a lot of the time go, right, I'm going to make a game now and then start like formalizing pitches. It's often quite an organic process. Maybe, you know, there's a lot of games come out of game jams and you're just like, oh, that one actually is kind of cool, and maybe you would work into a full game, or you're just noodling around prototypes and you're like, yeah, this could kind of go somewhere. A lot of the sort of smaller indie games do just sort of bubble out of other things, and then once you've kind of started to go, you know what, this might actually be a real video game, that's when you start thinking a little bit more like, okay, do I need to get a publisher on board? Do I need to hire some people to help me out? But it's like, yeah, when you're just yourself, you don't need to like sit down with a PowerPoint presentation to yourself and be like, right, game ideas, let's go.
Yeah. Or find other people that are passionate about those individual like moving cogs as well, right? I think there's one thing for indie that I think isn't felt as much in double or triple A, which is that with all of my friends that are indies, they are quite literally working from game to game to make make a living. Like, a lot of people have this idea of, you spend 3 years making an indie game, it makes $500,000, and then you're set, and then you have your next 5 years are fine and everything's okay. Like, most of the indie devs I know are only making, barely a living wage off of releasing their games, which is, amazing that they're able to do this, and the gamers are facilitating that for them to create their art. But there is an immense amount of personal risk in creating an indie project, because a lot of these people are, only earning enough just to get by to create this art, right? And for them, if this game doesn't do moderately well, then they have to quit game dev or go seek employment elsewhere, and that just gets multiplied if you start adding more people to the project. And if you're not, if you're not as fortunate as people like Mark and I, who have other streams of revenue or other avenues, being able to facilitate that time to create is incredibly hard to do. This is why you see a lot of the successful indie devs, not just because of the experience they gained, but AAA devs who have then gone to work in the indie space. They have the experience, but they also have savings from working in the AAA space for so long, getting to that pedigree where they're getting paid.
I will say one caveat I wanted to just add to the understanding for our listeners about this is when you're in AAA and you're coming up with a new concept, you have time as your enemy, right? You're kind of limited and restricted, so creativity is sort of an anxiety-driven thing. And also the stakes are much higher, because if your idea doesn't pan out, or the publisher doesn't like it, or if the fans don't like it once you release it, that's what leads to a lot of layoffs, right? You're trying to find work for all of these people. And when you're in when you have a 300, 400, 500 studio team just waiting to work on something, being creative in that sort of pressurized environment is not easy. And I think that's where you see a lot of, you're asking, a lot of AAA studios or even games in general, it's like, why aren't you as creative as an indie dev is in this space, right? Like, I love that indies have the flexibility to do that. But it's at a cost, right? Like, nothing's easy.
No. Yeah. It's super hard. And it's like, also, when when do you take that leap? Do you save up money? And like this is the conversation, because I know there are lots of people in chat who are probably, want to get into game dev and are thinking, when do I take that leap? When do I do that? And like, there are lots of different times to do it, but don't think that you need to save up 3 years worth of salary to begin, right? The best time to start is now, right? Even if it's, working on your full-time job, but coming back and working on prototyping like your movement system, like Mark was saying, or some aspect of the game, and spending, if you were working on it full time, maybe it would take you a couple weeks, a month, but it might take you 6 while working full time in another place, but you're making progress. And that might be working you towards a prototype that you might be able to bring to publishers or other devs in the space that might want to work on the project with you and take that risk, right? If you're not creating, regardless of the speed, things aren't gonna, move forward. And try and think of it in the space of, this is art, right? If you make beautiful art and express yourself through that, that's what will bring people in. Don't think you have to make the best game ever. Like the trap I see when I was teaching game dev at uni was like, all of the students wanted to be like, I want to make the next Hollow Knight. Like, I want to make this sprawling Metroidvania. And it's like, that's not going to happen. Well, maybe, but like, you can't go in with that mindset. It's very similar to YouTube. Like, people who go into YouTube thinking they want to make loads of money and have millions of subs. Like, if you go into it from the get-go with that, it poisons the well, and you need to move away from that. And you need to think about your fundamentals, how you're going to move forward, and just be open to learning, not just from yourself, from tutorials, other devs, right? Network. It's so hard.
So what motivates you then? Like, Mark, what motivated you to make your magnet game?
Well, it's just like, I mean, I've always wanted to make games. I think pretty much anyone who plays games at some point goes, I want to, I've got ideas.
You have ideas, yeah.
Everyone's got ideas, and it's throughout my sort of childhood, I tried making them and ran into various problems. I had some stuff that I was able to actually like finish, but for the most part, it just all fizzled out.
Oh wait, dive into the various problems. Like, what were you trying to make, and what were you using?
Okay, so I mean, like,
I get a modder vibe from you, Mark. Were you a modder?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what were you doing?
Modding. It was more. I liked Adventure Game Studio. Is that what Yahtzee used for some of his stuff? I think he might have used that. Yeah. So it was. I wanted to make point and click adventure game. I had this whole like dream of it. It would be like this like film noir style, and you'd have like this whole simulated city, and you'd have all these red herrings you could go down. And I spent so much time like watching film noir movies and taking notes, and I was writing out this whole story, and then realized like it was like way beyond my ambition. That was kind of like the wanting to make Hollow Knight game. It's like just way too ambitious.
We've all done that, right? I said that as a thing, like,
is that a rite
my
of
students
passage?
did this. It is like thinking, and also it's a rite of passage to think that every idea you have is gold, and to be like, this is the game, right? Like, this is the thing. So probably not.
What year did you do that, Mark?
This was like just before I did GMTK, so like 2012, 2013 sort of time.
So that's sort of where your game dev journey started. Is that fair?
I guess so. I made a. There's like the one wrinkle in the story of Mind Over Magnet being my first game is that I did have an iOS app that I released, but it was basically just Picross. I realized that at the time, which was many moons ago, there was not a good Picross game for iPad, and I was like, right, I'm going to make one. And so I made one using this very strange tool called Codia, where you could actually make iPad games on the iPad, and you could like write it in Lua and stuff. And it was it was kind of cool. But I never felt like it was my game. Like, Picross has already existed. I just sort of made this app. And then my next idea was, okay, what if you had like a Picross game where it's like you're playing Picross puzzles to fight enemies, kind of like Bookworm Adventures or something. And it was just an absolute failure because I ran into the problem of like just thinking it was a great idea and just like, let's just start working on it, and never like doing any prototyping or testing. and so that one fell apart. And just most of my game ideas just fell apart. And it was doing Game Maker's Toolkit and talking to developers and interviewing them was where I learned so much about like what are the best practices for process and production. And I still messed it all up, and I still made all these that I've learned. And that's kind of like one of the it's unfortunate because it's the piece of advice that like basically every developer will give to a new person, which is make your first game really small, really short, get all your mistakes done in that first project. But it's also the piece of advice that everyone ignores, including myself. They're just like, yeah, but it doesn't apply to me. I'm gonna perfect this first game. It's gonna they look at people like the guy who made Stardew Valley or whatever and be like, see, it can be done with your first game, but it's such a fallacy, and it's such
man,
incredibly rare for your first game.
It takes time. I'm already working on my video, Mark, my expose. Is Mark Brown a liar? Is this Magnet game not his first? So thank you for that juicy bit of info. But
I think he had a really good point,
Mhm.
though, that I want listeners to really latch onto, which is your game idea is just the first step, right? Learning the tools and actually trying to prototype it is where you start running. And just because your game idea is in prototype form doesn't mean it's going to work. You actually have to physically play it to know if it's going to be successful. And I think that's a lesson that you learned very early that I don't know if many indie devs or even just modders in general learn very quickly, which is you can't always stick with the game idea and carry it out to the very end. It has to evolve in order to make something fun.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the original idea for the game was it was supposed to be much more of a platformer, much more inspired by like Mario and Celeste and stuff, fast-paced, speedrunny type game. That was like, the idea I went in with. But it was, as I was going through the development and trying different things, it sort of became clear that this suited a puzzle game much more. And it was, you've got like one character going off and doing one thing, and then the magnet is doing something else, and that really suits puzzle design. And so it was, that was quite a hard pivot to make because I had this idea in my head. And it was like, this is surely what it's supposed to be, because that was the first thing I thought of, and then realizing down the line that no, that's just the starting point. That's like the seed that grows, and it's up to you as like the designer to cultivate that growth. And if it's going to start growing in a different direction, you just follow it and don't try and yank it back.
And isn't
so
it beautiful
to hear.
that whole process? Yeah, beautiful. That's the exact word for it, man. Because when I think about stories about what games were supposed to be initially and how they grew, I welcome somebody to fact check me on this, but I'm pretty sure, like 90% confidence. So I'll just say that Diablo was supposed to be turn-based, but I think it was one of the engineers who said, "What if it all just kind of, happened right away?" And then boom, a genre was born, right?
Yeah.
And to what you were saying earlier, connected to this type of beauty, the games that come out of game jams. When you mentioned that, Mark, I was thinking about Wolfire's Receiver. I don't know if anybody played that. I'm a fan, of course, because I like the shooters and the mill stuff and the simmy stuff. But also a great thing where it's like, okay, we only have 7 days, so we can only really do like one thing, and let's make it different and weird. And that was Receiver. Receiver, I guess for people who don't know, it's a shooter game where you have a gun and you go around and you kill robots, you collect tapes in a dystopian sort of a world. The cool thing about it is all the weapon mechanics are unique in the sense where, like, I don't know of any other games that really do it, where you press a button to pop out the magazine, you press a button to pop it back in, you press a button to pop it out and then put a bullet in, and then another, and yada yada. And through the limitation of not having a lot of time, you kind of force your own innovation. And that innovation, basically what I'm saying is it's beautiful that innovation can come out of unexpected places, like developing a game that had a core idea that was inspiring actually turns into something else entirely. That is also beautiful and inspiring.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I feel like the beginning journeys of game dev, and this obviously scales up when you go from indie to all the way up to triple, but there are two sides to it. There's this thinking your idea is gold, making it and realizing that it's not working and you might need to pivot to something else. Completely valid and okay to do that, right? And it's understanding that that's a thing. But it's also the other side of the coin is understanding that your idea might be good. It's just maybe the way you've implemented it, or the way you've framed a certain mechanic, or how it feels, might be holding it back, and giving it room to breathe and tweaking it. Making something and going, well, that doesn't work, and just deleting it can hinder, because you might fall into this place of just repeatedly doing that over and over and over until you feel you've found the thing. You might have had the thing, it's just it hadn't been incubated enough. And you've just got to, either through giving yourself a lot of time, be that monetarily, or working full time on something else and allowing things to breathe, you need to give your ideas that time, because you need to go through that process, what Mark was talking about. It's fascinating. Game dev is awesome. Game dev is so cool. It's such an awesome thing, and we get these great little packages to play at the end of it. Like, the process for me is way more fascinating and fun than playing them at the end, if that makes any sense. I love games, right? Games are like my life, but this process, like that, going through that, especially with other people, that's why I love indie, like collaborating with other creatives, and having those bounces. There's been instances in the past where I've been prototyping projects and they weren't really coming together, and another indie dev would come in and be like, have you tried this? And completely shifts it in like the perfect way, and there's this weird like excitement and euphoria of being like, oh my god, that's it, like this is the thing, right? Did you have any moments like that with like either prototyping or making mechanics come together, Mark?
Yeah, the main one was a thing I struggled with a lot throughout development was figuring out like the right difficulty for the game, and like who is this game for, and who's going to like enjoy it, and who's going to just find these puzzles too frustrating. And I felt like for a lot of the time I was very obsessed with like, this game needs to be really, really hard, because that means that it's good, because the best puzzle games are the ones that people are just sort of struggling with forever, because that means the puzzles are really well designed. And then I gave the game to just my dad to play. He doesn't play a lot of puzzle games, and he was just like having a rotten time with it, just absolutely hated it. And I'm like, why am I like, I want to make a game that everyone can enjoy, like, or at least like enjoy, and like I'm chasing the wrong people here. And a lot of it was just sort of like this like weird like ego-based thing of the game, I've got to make my game as hard as Steven Sausage Roll for it to be worthwhile. And it's like, no, my game can still be worthwhile if it's being enjoyed by kids or like a casual audience. So that was like one of those moments of like, I need to just redesign like every level of the game and just make it like just fun to play. And it was also that like by trying to chase those like that difficulty, I was just making the levels just suck to play, because they were so fiddly and finicky and had way too many elements on screen, because I'm trying to like hide the the real answer for people. It was just an absolute mess, and just being like, it was with that one playtest where like the the scales fell from my eyes. I'm like, I've got it now. Like, it's that eureka moment of like, I know who this game is for, and what the sort of style of the game should be, and all that sort of stuff.
Had another important pillar in game dev, knowing your audience, or what audience you want to capture.
That took way too long for me to figure out. That like I should have figured out like towards the beginning of the game dev, really is just like knowing who that game is for, and then pivoting, just making every decision flow to that person. I just didn't really have like a clear image in my head of like, who is this game for?
Would you have come to that realization though if you didn't begin with the mindset of wanting to make complex puzzles? Like maybe the difficulty that you landed on, you wouldn't have come to that realization without that that kind of that spike at the beginning. I think it's fascinating, right? Because not to get too deep into puzzle design, because I could talk about how puzzles are designed for years, but like understanding when that reward moment is, that like aha moment, and figuring it out, and managing like how long it takes to then get to the solution. You manage it so beautifully. Like nearly every instance of the puzzles I played, as soon as I would figure it out, I could then progress to complete it in like 5 seconds. And I'm like, boom, 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 done, right? And I'm still in that state of realization and euphoria to then complete it. And if you make them too complex, right, and you push that reward moment away from the actual completion, it starts to like dissipate, right? The curve goes down. I think you balance that really well. So thanks to your dad for making make that realization. That's so cool.
Yeah. It was definitely something I was thinking about, of like you're saying, like having that, like, when do you want the player to, with the puzzle, you want the player to struggle for a bit. You don't want them to walk into the room and say, right, yeah, A, B, C, done. You need them to be like having a bit of time to think. And you could, theoretically stretch that out where the player is thinking for like 20 minutes and then suddenly they go, oh, now I get it. But as long as you've got them there for 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, like you still get a satisfying moment of like, oh, I didn't know what I was doing. Oh, I see it now. I've got it. And then, like you say, you don't want them to be just like, right, I've got what I need to do. Now I've got to go through the actual like rigmarole of inputting this thing, and it's just kind of tedious. Like, like that's the moment. Is just like, I thought I understood this puzzle. I don't get it now. Oh, there I see it. Right, cool. That's the best thing. Now get them going.
Yeah, 100%. You used like very little, and I commend this. You used very little obfuscation within the puzzles themselves. So, like for the audience, obfuscation is when you add elements to intentionally throw the player off or confuse them, like maybe adding an extra piece. Mike's here. Hello, Mikee.
Yay.
Hello. Don't let me interrupt. It's good.
No worries. You had very little obfuscation, which meant that when I enter the room, I knew that every functional piece I saw, I knew was part of the solution, and it was very like sequential and movement based, rather than like, okay, well, is this thing actually used in the puzzle, or is it like just there because to confuse me, right? And not to say obfuscation in puzzle games is a bad thing. Some games do it really well, like Portal does it fantastically with redundant portal surfaces and stuff like that. But your lack of them was to the benefit, and also doesn't inflate the difficulty to a needless degree.
Yeah. I mean, that was when I was, talking a minute ago about like trying to make the puzzles harder. That was a technique that I would sometimes try and use, was just like, okay, I need to like just like hide the solution from the player in as many ways as possible, and it just made it so painful to actually play it. And that was like another realization was I would come up with a puzzle idea or puzzle design, and because I had designed it, I'm like, oh, well, it's obvious what you have to do. This is the easiest puzzle in the world. And so then I would try and obfuscate it as much as possible without actually testing it on other people to see what they thought of it. And it was only through doing these playtests that like, not everyone has the same information in their brain that I does.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
We called that at uni, we called it the cave story problem, because Cave Story was famous for having puzzles that the dev thought were very easy, but to I would want to say normal player, to someone who's just gone in fresh, they have no idea what was the dev thinking. Like, you don't want to enter a puzzle and start thinking about the dev's thought process. That, I feel like it really takes you out. So it is a problem. And like, as you got to that realization of like understanding your newly realized target audience, Mikee, Tina, I guess to everyone, do you feel it's important to understand your target audience early on, or do you think that's something, because I think this is a spectrum, right? I think AAA might think very differently to indies and double. Like, do you think it's important to lock down your target audience before you start finalizing things?
So this is a very personal question for me, because I don't think I've ever been the target audience for the games I love.
Interesting.
Because you don't see like shooters being marketed to people like me, at least when I was growing up, right?
Do you mean that from like a gender perspective, or how do you mean not being marketed towards you?
I think gender perspective is probably the foremost, most obvious one. Right? Like, even games in general, when I was 10 years old, 12 years old, like, they weren't like, hey, girls, buy Sega. So that one is a little bit odd for me. to answer just because of my lived experience. But I do think it's important to understand what kind of player skill-wise you want to play, not necessarily their demographic or where they're from. And I think that's where a lot of sort of AAA devs can get stumble. Whereas when they say know your target audience, they're like, oh, someone who loves watching Star Wars and is 18 to 30. It's like, but what is their skill set, right? And their skill set may vary from, first time gamer to I need a ton of challenges and I probably will benefit from skill-based matchmaking. As much as people hate to say it, So I think in what Mark was saying earlier, which is watching his father play and then understanding, oh, I want like the wider audience to appreciate and enjoy it. I think that's what people should focus on when they mean target audience. And so, anyways, that I'm done with my diatribe. But yeah, Mike, what about
Not
you?
a diatribe. Well, I guess if the question is, do you need to know target audience earlier? Like, do you need to confirm it earlier? Sounds like the question that you're asking, right, Jay? Just to confirm.
Yeah.
There was an impulse in my head that said, well, of course, initially, like, duh, like you got to knowing it as early as possible. But then I kind of was thinking more and think about what you said, Tina. I feel like there could be an argument for, instead of trying to know immediately your target audience, if we're talking like early, it might just be better to, as a designer, as a developer, just make something that feels fun. Like, what's a fun thing that I'm doing right now? And speaking of fun things, right? For people who can't see, yeah, I keep snickering a little bit. But thank you, Eric. I like this. That appears to be a bird ghillie hat and bird shit, not ejaculate. Bird shit. I would like to reassure everybody. That's a reference to an old picture. Thank you, Nick. I can see you're enjoying the stream. I feel like, artistically speaking, like it might sometimes be better to not think about the audience, like who you're selling to. It might be better to just think like, hey, what's fun? What do I like? I'm not special in a sense. Other people might like what I like, big or small, and I'm gonna make the best thing if it's people that I like. Like, excuse me, I'm gonna make the best thing that I can. I'll be best at making a thing that I like, and that'll be the best for them, even if that's a small group and a small niche. However, that's like a pretty indie perspective, right? Like, that's where I think indies should start. If you own a company and you have people that are beholden to you and they all look at you as the lead and they say like, what are we doing next? That's not very responsible. Like, you do have to think about, okay, who are we targeting? Who do we want to get this toward? I guess the kind of boring truth is like, it's probably a bit of a balance right from the beginning. Think about like what excites you and your team, and then think about what kinds of, is there an audience out there for this? Like, you kind of have to ask both. It's like, it's mega subjective, and it's I guess it sounds like a cop-out answer, but I guess you have to balance the two, because I think it's the truth, honestly. It's a boring truth.
Yeah, I don't think you'd ever want to like start out. I mean, maybe this might happen in like the AAA stuff. You don't want to start being like, we need to make a game for 8 to 14-year-old girls. So what type of game should we make for? That's like a weird place to start. You want to make your game, start working on it, and then at some point during development, like, right, who is going to enjoy this game? What sort of games have they already been playing? What sort of experiences are they going to bring into this? And then how can we kind of make sure we're keeping the game in line with that? And we're not just suddenly just making this game for the most hardcore people possible.
Exactly.
It's, you got to like, but you don't want to have it too early on. Otherwise that is going to like throttle the types of ideas you might be able to bring in. Yeah.
100%. There's this trap you can fall into as well, though, which is if you start thinking about this too early on, or having the spark for your game idea being based on a specific genre, or even worse, a specific game. You see this a lot with like Souls likes.
Yeah.
And I've made a few videos on this topic, on the sense of thinking, well, people like Souls likes, I like Souls likes. There's like the Souls series, I'm gonna make that, and attempting to replicate a feeling and a vibe and even gameplay systems without understanding why they work, and just in that pursuit of, well, if this is good, it will sell well because people like Souls-likes. I don't think that's a great angle to come from. I'm not saying that every game has to be this wholly unique, mechanically intense thing. Some of my favorite games are speaking to the games that were favorites from my childhood, right? But they don't feel like they were trying to capture that specific audience. Sometimes, as a gamer, not speaking from a dev perspective, as a gamer, I can smell that. I can smell that they're trying to, not copy, but grab that audience, and it feels a little bit dirty to me, and it steers me away. But you need to try and not fall into that trap. But like having a spark of, I really liked this game, I want to make something similar, right? It is good. Just don't fall into the, well, let's go see how they did their movement system and just copy that the best I can, right? Because it'll never quite get there, and you as the dev and the players will feel that, and just going for something more unique, I think, is better. Oh, Tina.
I have a question. Mark.
Tina has a question.
So we've all gone through the process of making a game, it being a very vulnerable creative experience, like extremely vulnerable. You're like leaving it all on the line. Now that you have your game out and you do have a big ground foundation for being a critic of gaming and design, how has this changed you?
Yeah.
And also, do you want to say any? Do you want to give any apologies to gamers? I'm just kidding.
Apologies.
I'm kidding.
Mark's really good. Does positive videos like
positive videos.
Tina's cornering Mark.
I'm
digging
teasing.
in.
No, I'm teasing.
No, I think it is definitely it is a fair question, and it is something that I was always very wary of when I was making the videos before making games. Was like, I don't ever want to speak out of turn, and so if I was going to say something that I wasn't fully knowledgeable about, I would reach out to a developer and get like a sense check on it and make sure I'm not just chatting nonsense. Since making my game, I mean, like, part of me is like, turns out making games is incredibly difficult, so we should give game developers, like, cut them loads of slack. But at the end of the day, as like a player or a critic, like, the player doesn't care so much that games are hard. Like, they just want to know if it's fun and worth their money. And so it's I think I don't really do reviews anymore, but I used to do them in a past life, and it's like, you can't be too generous to developers just because it's so hard, because all that matters is it a good game. But it is something where I'm like, there's just so much that I have learned from doing this game that has already informed the games I'm making. The videos I'm making and I'm discussing. It was like interesting to me that I made this video about Valve's playtesting approach, and as I was making it, I'm like, this is such an obvious video. Why has this taken me like 8 years to get this video? This should have been like one of the first videos I made on the channel, and then realizing like, I just didn't think about playtesting at all until it was my everyday experience of this, and realizing just how vitally important it is. There's lots of topics that I'll be talking about more on my channel that are just like, you don't fully appreciate them until you are in the trenches.
I do think there's an invisible tax that game devs make that never is really understood or acknowledged in game critiques until you go through the experience of game dev itself. And I wonder if, now that you've lived through it, Mark, that like invisible tax that we pay to make a game, is it even worthwhile to try to bring that element of the game dev experience into criticisms, or is it better to just leave that at the wayside and continue just critiquing a game for what it is? Like, for me, for instance, when I play a game and I see like a feature has kind of fallen apart, I'm not coming from a place of, oh, this really pisses me off. I'm like, oh, the devs struggled here. That sucks. And then I continue like moving on and not necessarily excusing it, but I'm like, okay, I get it. You know, like something happened here. But
I'm
I understand.
smiling because, sorry, just
Mark, yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Sometimes I'm not that good about it. I wish I could be more like you. Sometimes I find myself getting frustrated or not like flip the chair angry, but just frustrated, like, oh, why is it like this? They should have done better. And then I kind of come to reason to what you're saying, which is like, no, like, look, I'm sure everybody wanted it this way. It just didn't work out for boring, real reasons. That's all I wanted to say. That's why I was smiling. Continue.
Just to add mine before Tina continues, I'm in the middle in the sense that I think like casually as myself, I'm just like Tina. I'm like, that sucks. I like, as someone who's in the trenches too and is educated on these topics, I can see it too, that they wanted to do this one thing but didn't. But my like design delve persona is a little bit more mad and unhinged than I am IRL. So gets really mad about things, but I try to use that as a vehicle to educate and be like, so like for instance, my next video that's coming out for a short teaser for viewers is on live service game UI and why it's designed the way it is and why it can be frustrating and obtuse. And it sounds like I'm just dogging on all of these UI designers and stuff like that. But towards the end, you know, we start to talk about why and, you know, how much funding UI designers get, like the team sizes in comparison to the 3D artists and stuff like that, and how they're encouraged to focus on certain aspects. So you use that rage as a way to teach people because my God, Mark, do I wish I could make positive videos like you, but my negative videos always do so well. So you use it as a tool.
Yeah.
I have thoughts on this too of like the critic versus the dev critic and like the value of each. But before I jump in there, I want to hear, Mark, what your answer to Tina was, if you were finished, Tina, because I know I completely interrupted you.
No. I want to know how critiquing or understanding development and design, how has that changed, or what are you going to carry with you moving forward? You know.
Well, I kind of would like turn that back on you, Tina, because you have been in the press. You've been in that world. Like, you know, if you went back in time to EGM, would you do things differently?
You know what? One of my first big reviews was on Call of Duty World at War, and I said the zombies mode was a gimmick. I think that was the first time they introduced zombies, and I was so wrong like this. People love it. So I would go back and see what you saying. It's just so different from what, you know, COD was in general, which is a good thing. But what would I do differently?
I know you. I'm sure you didn't do anything too crazy, right, Tina?
No. I think criticism of a game and the game mechanics, the flow of the game, the story, like that is all valid stuff. And I'm not insinuating that that should change. It's just it's hard not to have that game dev experience in the back of your mind when you play now. Right? And I'm trying to find the words to explain why that is or how that is. And I was hoping, Mark, that you could help me with that.
I think we, you know, going through game dev and not just like making the games, but my experience of talking to developers and chatting to them, realize why certain decisions were made. And there are so many factors outside of just like, I want to make a good game. There is budget and time and publishers breathing down your neck and all of these things that are going to affect it. So I think that like helps me just as a person who enjoys things. Like I'm not getting irrationally angry at a video game because I'm like, I'm sure they tried their best, but they ran out of time or whatever. And, you know, I understand, like, from making my own game, like I had ambitions to put so much more content into the game, but I just ran out of time and I had to cut the scope. And then seeing that same thing happened to like the Wind Waker and just being like, hey, if it happened to Nintendo and they had to drop a bunch of dungeons from the Wind Waker, then it's good enough for me.
Yeah.
But I do, when it comes to criticism, like I do just come back to that thing of like, if I was just a gamer and I had, $60 to spend on a video game, I just want to know, like, is it an awesome game? Is it going to be the best game ever? I don't want to open up the box and there's like a note in it saying, I'm so sorry, we tried really hard, but we ran out of money. Or
Oh man,
it's difficult. Like, that'd be nice.
Did you guys like? Have you guys played games like that? Because I remember
Yes.
Homefront: The Revolution had something I think similar to that. I'd have to go and double check. I'm not saying they did, but if you start up Homefront: The Revolution, what's that?
Yeah, there was a game I played recently that was like an indie game that opened with a crawl, which was like, this was made by like two people. Like, please forgive this, and I can't remember the title. And part of me was like, oh, like, I mean this sincerely, like, bless them. Like, and it did kind of change how I viewed things. It kind of put me in that mindset. But also, as Mark is speaking to, like, it doesn't change the product, right? Like if it's it was good, but like if it was shoddily put together and it was, not ready to be released, but they were like, well, we're only two people. That doesn't excuse it, but like having that mindset is really important. I think there's something in the sense of criticism, and as someone who I guess like game analysis or critic, whatever you want to call it, a lot of players do have that angry mindset and are angry when they see issues.
Sure.
I guess in a way, if you can frame it as like, oh, I'm angry about this thing, but actually let's look deeper. Like, why is this the case? And how, if you are thinking about it design wise, how could we, if they had the time for it, how could we improve it? It's always just getting to that educational side for me.
I think the thing that I'm trying to process in my head that I've been trying to say, and now I'm walking away understanding. I'm so bad at this, Mark. You have to understand. Like it's hard to find the words like in the moment, but I think it's become easier to critique from a place of wanting the game to be better, right? Rather than thinking of it from the perspective of, is your money well spent? And I think there's a ton of value in coming in and criticizing a game from the, am I spending my money in the best way possible with this thing? Right? Like, I think that's valid. That should always exist. I don't want listeners thinking that I'm saying like there should be no criticism, because that's not the case. I think being able to critique a game for devs to understand where they failed so they can improve in the future is extremely valuable. And having that as a skill that you can articulate well, I think that's something, Mark, that you have and that you're even better for now that you've gone through your own experience. And I think that's the gist of what I was trying to get at earlier.
Right, yeah, because I mean there are different types of critics out there, like the stuff that me and you were doing, Jay. It's like, it's not, we're not really like trying to tell people which games to buy. Like, that's not important to us. Leave that to IGN and stuff. Like, there's criticism. I don't really know the exact definitions of those, but there's always going to be a space for just like, should I buy this game or not? But there is, it's great that there is such a good space, and a lot of it does happen on YouTube, but there's a lot of it on like social media of people thinking about games and talking about games in a deeper level, analyzing them and criticizing them in that way that is interesting for players, interesting for other developers, but is also, like you say, useful for the game, the original game developers to see. Though I did sort of have a question about that for you guys, which is, I've obviously got lots of reviews on my game on Steam and some other places, and there's so much in the reviews that like I knew about. Like, people were like, "Oh, this game's really short," and I'm like, "Yeah, I know." And that feeling of like wanting to like scream at these people, or like you can't go to your players and being like, "Look, you've got to understand. Like, I'm struggling with my YouTube channel and all these sorts of things." How do you deal with these things about your game that you knew were going to come up in the reviews? Or I suppose the question maybe is, how what percentage of stuff that comes up in the reviews for the games you've worked on are you like, yeah, I totally saw that
surprised by?
coming, versus, wow, okay, I wasn't expecting people to say that.
Good question. It's a good question.
Yeah.
I feel like I think most is not a surprise, not because of any like skill or ability of like, oh, a good dev will know 80% of the reviews and why. I think most devs will know why, because we're in it and we often see like the problems. I mean, you're talking about some of them yourself of like, yeah, I know it's short. Yeah, I wanted more. I know there's not a lot of this content and stuff. So much of game development is just an aggregate of difficult decisions, and they're difficult because you know that both things are bad. You know why it's bad, and that badness is going to translate to the consumer when they eventually go and they play it. That whole process, I think, just makes you mostly understand and not be too surprised. So, like, I'd say the large majority of reviews that are negative, you get it, and even if it's not a thing where it's like, oh, I know, I don't like that either. It's also the thing of like, oh, well, yeah, this game just wasn't for you, right? Like, I'm thinking about my time on Insurgency Sandstorm, which is like a tactical shooter with a hardcore gameplay. It's not wickedly hardcore. It's somewhere in the middle of Tarkov and Arma and Squad over here, and like Battlefield, Siege, Counter-Strike. We're all over here. Like, and when you're in the middle of the spectrum with a game like that, at least, curious about, you, Tina and Jay, but like you get a lot of people who will write negative reviews, and it's because the game's not for them. Like this wasn't on the spectrum of pacing and hardcoreness and shooter environments. They don't like that, or there's subject matter in the game that they don't like that they find sensitive. All that stuff just kind of makes sense, and I mean, there's no ill will toward it. That being said, there's definitely the reviews where you want to facepalm and go like, oh my God, your expectations are unrealistic. That's not how this works. You have an unrealistic view, not just of the business, but of like life in general. And that's when you get to the ones that are like more egregious, that are complaining about things like, I don't know, representation being needing to be this other way when you feel like you're a representative, or it's sensitive in XYZ ways. Those are the ones that I usually go to, and I think like I kind of see where you're coming from in this way, but also you got to understand. And I can give some examples of that because that itself is sensitive. But Tina, maybe first, like, what about you?
I think for me it depended, Mark, on the type of game that was being released. Right when I was doing a box product, right, like people are paying $60 or $70 for a game, and there was criticisms. When you're on a AAA game, you're just one of like many people, right? And so you know that when your game is being shipped and you see some issues that like maybe were out of your hands, like, and that part is like extremely frustrating for me personally when I saw like, hey, you didn't have this game mode from the jump. I hate this game, like 2 out of 10. I'm like, God damn it, if we just added search and destroy from the beginning, we would have gotten this person's, love. There was weird things like that. And then when I eventually started doing like live service games or the free-to-play game, and I was reading criticisms of the game that were obviously valid and I knew would come up, it doesn't hurt as much to read, because in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, oh, we can address that. This is a game that's not going to be stagnant, right? We can update it. So they hurt less when you read stuff like that. But I think it was always a general insecurity of, are people going to play this and buy it and like it? That never goes away. And you're just like hoping and crossing fingers like people like it. But yeah, when you're seeing criticism that you knew about, and it really depends on the person. I think also over time, you'll eventually just create some sort of, I don't know, shield over your heart, right? When you're reading things.
Shield over your heart. Ooh.
Yeah, you're going to read stuff that's maybe not so kind, and that's when you have to
That's when you get more annoyed, and it's...
Well, just as a developer, you like, even the greatest designers out there that I have worked with personally have learned to just sort of understand what is valid feedback and let that in, and what is just I want to hurt you, and then
That
they're
is my
able to just
exact point.
easily push
Yeah.
it away. I don't know how they do it. I don't know if it's just learned over time. They should give a TED
I
talk on
think
this.
I do feel like I'm not like perfect at it. I mean, I'm saying here myself, like I
Yeah.
have emotions as a human being. I get
we
frustrated
all
with a
do.
game, even if I know that like the reason why I'm frustrated is probably because of a broader macro failure and they're aware of it and there just wasn't time, yada yada. I similarly get frustrated or angry over reviews that I read and the content of them annoys me in XYZ way, whether it's a lack of understanding about the industry or just the furthering of some sort of ideology that I think is toxic or destructive, whatever. I definitely have those reactions, but I can say that like one of the things I try to be to acknowledge and always grow about myself is like the reduction of your ego and the acceptance of the feedback and the interpretation of it to say, okay, this guy's being a bit of a real dickhead, but there's some fair points there. And I feel like that is a learned
right?
skill. No, I
It's
think
always guys.
at the risk of throwing around gender stereotypes, Tina, you
Uh-huh.
might be right. But I also don't know
Uh-huh.
because a lot of people write shit anonymously.
That's right.
Who knows if they're good? But I also get what you mean, and that's a whole other conversation. It might be mostly men that act more toxically when it comes to Call of Duty feedback. Is my guess. We have to keep in mind, like it's interesting to talk to you because like Call of Duty is such a wide net, right? You
Sure.
get all different kinds of people, and that means the real bad ones, and they're going to rise to the top. And yeah, with mine, like there are all kinds of things where, like with the tactical shooter in particular, I'll just speak to that specifically. You get a lot of really passionate fans. We euphemize it, right? If that's a word. Oh, it's just their passion. Oh, we have a lot of passionate fans who have expressed their passionate opinions, and that's kind of true. Like, there's a little bit of a kernel of truth to that. You gotta like read through all the bullshit. It's like, all right, well, this is a person who played the game and doesn't like X. Sometimes it's invalid if it's like a toxic thing or whatever, or the game just wasn't for them. It's a skill. I think as a designer, especially, you have to do it. You have to not take it personally. And if you
Yeah.
do, then you have to challenge yourself in your head and go, okay, I'm getting
Yeah.
too emotionally invested.
I just think that's also a learned skill to read or hear feedback and able to actually get to the bottom of what they're saying. So, Mark, when you read
That's
criticism
true.
of your
Yeah.
of your game saying there's not enough content here, what they're actually saying is, please give me a sequel immediately. And I think that's a good thing, right?
Some of them are. Some of them are saying, "I want a
Yeah.
refund." You've screwed me over. But you know, yes, it is. Yeah, but that is
They're
actually
just
part of
being
it.
salty,
It's like,
yeah.
yeah, are they saying they want more, or are they saying that they just were disappointed? And filtering feedback is actually like a really critical thing. Kind of goes back to the stuff we're talking about with the target audience. Like if someone comes in and it's just like, yeah, I didn't like your game because it didn't have like guns in it, and I'm like, okay, I guess I got to add some guns. It's like, no, that's not part of what the game is about. That's not my core pillars. That's not my target audience. Like,
Solve a puzzle with a magnet and shoot the magnet. Yeah,
exactly.
no.
Yes, for some people that's what they wanted, but it's like you've got to knowing like what is your game actually like. What is the core pillars of the game, and who is it for? Keeping that in mind is really important when you're taking a feedback because
It's
it's
a
so easy
skill.
to ping pong. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really difficult to develop that, right? Like, and this isn't just talking about games, but like any criticism at all. Like Mikey was saying, letting go of ego is super important. A lot of designers early on we spoke about it earlier, have this inflated ego. My idea is the best one, and any criticism you have of that is a criticism of me and my ideas and what I believe I am. But that's not the case. It is a gift when, especially another industry professional criticizes your work, because most of the time they will criticize it in a way that gives you a thread to pull, to push it in whatever direction to try things out. And being able to read that through comments or reviews is a really, really difficult skill to develop, because it is difficult not to take, especially if you know it's an issue, right? Because in your head, you're like, okay, I know this is an issue. And then somebody goes, this is an issue. And it's difficult not to go, yeah, I know it's an issue, right? But you have to develop that and read through and cut through a lot of that bullshit and go, okay, so what are they trying to say here, right? And that just takes time, right? Like Mark, I don't know if you agree, like YouTube comments are a really good learning tool for that, because a lot of the times how people articulate criticism of videos is not always worded in a nice way. And
or it's not in
yeah.
good faith or that sort of
Yeah.
thing. You know, actually, that is a good point. That like when I started YouTube, you know, I took every comment extremely personally, and it was
Yes.
just like, and then over time, you start to realize like, okay, this subsection of my audience, when they say that, they're just kind of jealous that I've got this YouTube channel, and you know, they're trying to annoy me in that way, and these people are, you know, you could sort of write them off for this, but these people I want to take their feedback, and they're trying to be helpful, and sort of that was actually quite a useful thing for when I got into game dev, of being like which of the feedback is vital. But it was like it is sort of common to have that big ego and to just sort of think that I'm the designer of this game, I know what's best. But I think as soon as you get some good feedback that improves the game, and you go, I would not have thought about that if it wasn't for this playtest or this person's advice, you just from that point have to keep reminding yourself, like, I don't always have the best ideas. Sometimes I can't have the best ideas because I'm just too close to this project, and I'm just not going to be seeing these good eyes. So you've got to like, I've just like I really disliked getting feedback for multiple reasons. One, of just like it was always just painful to my ego. Two, it was horrible to watch a thing that I knew, like, putting out this build that I knew I wasn't happy with, and having to see someone rip it to shreds. I hated it. And I just cringe myself inside out when someone is, watching one of my YouTube videos and I'm in the same room, I have to leave. And it was the same with it was horrible. I hated playtesting, but it was also the most important thing I did. And so I did it constantly, consistently throughout the whole project. I think it is like the worst and best thing to do.
Oh yeah,
I'd like to
for it, right?
I have a suggestion
you just get hungry.
too.
Oh yeah,
Mark, if you ever want to do a YouTube video on how to be an amazing designer, I think it could be a roundtable discussion, and I think we'd be happy to help you with that.
Sure, definitely.
That'd be cool, man.
There's
a lot of facets. I feel like well, first I'll say as a response to that, like we're covering a lot of ground here, right? As far as like the let's say like layperson's psychological aspect of game dev, right? Of don't have the ego, decipher the feedback, don't take it personally, stay motivated, find the inspiring thing, et cetera, and then all the other aspects of just like the playtesting, like the harder stuff, I guess. And that was what I kind of wanted to ask about. Was I'm curious what playtesting looked like for you, Mark. You mentioned this a few times, and I feel like with indie devs that I talk to and work with, they don't understand the importance of that. And it's one of those things, just like so much of what we're talking about, it's easy to say, oh, X is more important. Oh, you have to not have an ego. Duh. Playtesting is super important. But man, like you really got to commit to those things. And playtesting's a tough one because it's not just a mindset thing. It's like logistical, and there's planning and there's communication. So tell me about your playtesting process for the game, just in general, and what you believe is the right way to do it, at least for your scale and maybe other scales.
Yeah, the main thing I did throughout development was just when I had felt like I'd done a chunk of work that I wanted to get some eyeballs on, release a build. I used Twitter before it was a disaster space, and would put out a tweet saying, anyone want to play this game? Get some DMs. I would generally sometimes talk to the person and kind of make sure this was kind of, as we're, again, discussing this target audience thing, making sure, like, what sort of games do you like? What sort of puzzle games do you like? Making sure that their feedback is going to be useful before I give them this build. I would always ask them to record themselves playing the game. It was just like, I didn't want to just like, go play this and come back and write some stuff to me. That was somewhat useful, but the best thing is just record yourself playing. Talk to yourself as you're playing, like just say anything that comes into your head. That's super useful. And then just get back this, YouTube video of them playing through the game and just watch it and take as many notes as possible. Listen to what they're saying, but more importantly, watch what they're doing. Being like, oh, they missed that. They've solved this puzzle in a dumb way or a weird way that I need to fix. So yeah, just like really watching it. Also, like going into a playtest with kind of a bit of a question to answer, like, okay, I want to know, is the difficulty right on this? Okay, this playtest is going to either confirm or deny that. That was really important.
Yeah, you got it. You do have to
Yeah.
give them a bit of direction. It sounds
Help the
nice.
playtester focus.
Yeah, it sounds nice to say, I'm just going to let you talk and be free and express yourself to me because I want to hear the honest truth because I have no ego. Like, we can say that, but the truth is, like, you got to give a little bit of direction when you're doing playtesting because you only have so much time, right? And it's like, not everybody knows how to give good feedback because that in itself is kind of a skill. And it's a part of any sort of feedback process of, like, you need specificity. Otherwise, they're going to be like, well, it feels really good, I like it, which isn't helpful. Or, well, it feels really bad, I don't like it, which also isn't very helpful. You need, like, some specifics of, like, oh man, this puzzle, if you need feedback on this puzzle, I will spend my time telling you all the things I think about this puzzle, good and bad. What would you find were a lot of how specific would you get? Was it like, okay, I'm doing a playtest just about this puzzle, or I'm doing a playtest just about how I changed the movement acceleration slightly? What were some of your example topics, I guess, or targets?
Yeah, I mean, it changed a lot throughout development. So there was a time where I was just working on the character controller, and so I was just giving people a demo where it's not the game at all. It's just a room where you can run around it. I'm just like, tell me how this feels. Actually, I did a sort of fun thing with that. Is I gave people the tools to tweak some of the settings of that thing of being like, play around with this platforming character, and if you don't like how it feels, open the settings, change the jump height, change the gravity, and tell me what stats you think work. And so that was kind of a good way to sort of crowd
you design it, you prick.
Yeah, you design it.
You think I didn't do it right? Tweak it.
Yeah, if you're
tell
so
me,
smart,
I don't
you
know.
do it. So that was
and
that was
sorry,
useful.
before you continue, was there an objective in that room? Were they just running around an empty room, or what did it look like?
Just an empty room. It was just like the objective to them was just to have fun and just tell me if this feels good or not.
That's interesting.
Another thing was you sort of talking about like having a specific direction. There would be times where I'm working on like world 3 of the game, and I'm design the puzzles for that, and I want some playtest data. But it was very difficult to just give someone a build that's just world 3 because there's so much knowledge and mechanics and tutorials that they've built up through worlds 1 and 2. So it would be a case of just like give them the whole game, and then I'd be like, I'm just going to skip ahead in the video until the bit I actually need, because it was otherwise the information wouldn't be so useful because their feedback is like, I don't know how to jump, and I'm like,
the conditioning hasn't been set.
Yeah, that was in world 1. Sorry. So it kind of had to give people that full experience. The one other thing I'd say about playtesting was so useful to do all the stuff online. That was great, but it was like I had to make sure I did some playtesting in person. It's just a different experience. It is. And that feeling of being in the same room as someone who just does not understand your game is such a painful experience, and it's a very good motivation to make your game good, because you're just like, I never want to be in this experience ever again.
I'm thinking of a specific one, and then I'm sorry, Teenage. Let me just share this real quick, and then I'll
no, go for it.
As an FPS dev, there's definitely people that it's like, oh, this game like isn't for you, and I don't think your feedback would help me too much unless it's about specific things. And I'm thinking about a time that I was at E3 or Gamescom, one of those events, and we had a booth, and a guy who just didn't seem like a gamer, which is of course fine, and they go to those events and it's fine, was trying to play, and he was trying to shoot people, but like it's Seriously Sandstorm was the game. It's free aim, which means there's no cursor in the middle of the screen, and your barrel kind of moves freely, right?
Wow.
And that's a little different from most FPS games. I don't expect people to like fully get that, but you kind of expect most people to play games to intuitively understand that like you're pointing a tube somewhere, that's the barrel, and it's going to go out and it's going to travel in the direction at which the 3D object is pointing. But somebody was playing the game and they were trying to like take the tip of the rifle and like put it on top of the bad guy, like you would, like if if the mesh crosses alignment with the bad guy I'm trying to shoot, it'll shoot. But it's 3D, so the gun's just going out there. It was the equivalent of like watching your dad try to play a shooter. And I remember standing there and like I felt the cringe. I felt like, oh man, like I want to explain to this guy, but also like I have so many other things to do. I think it might be worth it for me to go to one of the other booths but in doing that, I have to allow him to remain frustrated at that computer and not have a good time. It was an interesting moment of feedback triage. But I definitely that's what I was thinking of, and I was smiling about.
Bless him.
That is a thing with playtesting, is this idea of, I think it's very tempting to jump in and tell the playtester, oh no, you're doing it wrong. Here's how you're supposed to do it. But that's like just very unhelpful, really, in the grand scheme of things, because at the end of the day, the player's not going to have you over their shoulder telling them how to play. So you need to try and simulate that experience as much as possible in playtesting.
It's so difficult. Right. Because of time constraints, what we'll do is we'll move on to, we've got a few really nice donos with some good questions. So we'll answer them, and depending on how time goes, we'll see if we've got time for game dev pitch stuff, improv pitch, but we shall see. So
pitch.
The pitch. So I'm terrible at pronouncing names. Luis, help.
Just say it and move forward.
Perez, or Lap 343, gives $5. Thank you. Says just want to great job everyone. Just want to say great job everyone. Love all the talks, laughs, and game dev content. Hell yeah, we love it too.
Thank you.
Game dev.
Thank you. Those are always nice. Thank you.
Retro Guy 200 gives 35 ZAR. Anybody know what a ZAR is? We've got 35 of them.
No.
Is it African, maybe?
Yeah, maybe.
How's it spelled?
And they say
ZAR.
It's ZAR, yeah.
South African rand.
Oh, there we go.
Oh.
Mark, look at you currency wizard. And they say game jams are such an integral and fun part of game development. It's a fun way to test your knowledge and get more ideas. Oh yeah, I absolutely. Some of my fondest game dev memories are all game jams. They're really intense, but super fun, especially if you're collaborating. It can be such a great way to throw away, and also like not just push yourself, but just prove to yourself what you're capable of.
Really quickly.
Absolutely, really quickly. I love them. Obviously, Mark, you've got a lot of experience with game jams and hosting game jams.
I have experience hosting them. I've never actually entered a game jam.
So
that's something I definitely want to do soon.
Yeah.
It was kind of one of those things of like, I didn't feel like I had the confidence to enter one. And then once I started working on this game, I'm like, I probably could now, but I don't want to distract myself from the game. So
you're a big commercial dev now.
Exactly. Now I can do the game jams.
Right in.
But yes, I do have some experience running game jams. Yeah.
Hell yeah. Tina, Mikey, do you have experience with game jams?
Yeah. I the last thing I did with Meta on Onward, a VR game, as a game mode called Mercenary Mode, that was born out of a game jam, which was awesome. It went super well. The engineers are feeling the concept that I pitched, and it sucked because they laid me off before it got released. But the team took it, and it eventually made it public, which is a lot better than a lot more than a lot of people can say, right? Where entire projects get canceled. I got laid off before it crossed the finish line, but that's the thing that just happens. It still came through, and it still was core to my vision, at least for what it would have been. And then it had iterations that made it even better. I remember playing it being like, oh yeah, that would have been a problem that I had not foreseen, that I could see that they solved, which was a nice feeling to have, while also seeing, but they understood that this part that I thought was core was still core, and they kept that. So that was a nice memory, which was associated to turnaround from the sadness of being laid off and all that means of not working on a certain project anymore, but seeing but I did make a difference. So it had emotional value in that way too.
If nice by story. Game jam you mean coming up with a feature within a month, yes, I've done that. So on Infinite Warfare,
non-consensual game jam.
No, it was not consensual. So on Infinite Warfare, I was producing part of the E3 build that we were making, and one of the big features was what we called the ops map or operations table. So in the space game, you go into your main area of the spaceship to pick a mission. None of that was designed or created yet. And they're like, we have to show it in the E3 trailer. And I was like, holy crap. So they, I think the creative director had me schedule like an outside team to come in to give us like an idea of what they could do for us because we were crunched on time. They're like, oh, cool. We see what you want to do. It's going to be $400,000. And then I said, F that. And then one of the designers, Mike Anderson, who's a friend of mine, and then Antoine Gersant, which was the UI engineer, the three of us came together and we're like, what can we do in like 3 weeks? So we had a week of like, testing. And then whatever you saw at E3 is what we came up with.
Damn.
The planets
That's
and like
wild.
picking out your stuff. Yeah, no, it was insane. So yeah.
Okay, well there we go. Non-consensual game jam. As Mikey said.
I think
Absolutely
that's a-
Game jam.
a
You were
bunch of AAA.
volunteered to do a game jam.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Wasn't expecting to get some awesome stories like that, but we got them. All right, we got a few more to go through. We've got Snake in the Garden, gives €2. Thank you so much. It says, Mark, what genre do you always love to play or try?
I mean, I do like puzzle games. It was kind of apt for me to make one. I'm a big fan of detective games. I don't know if that's really like a genre, but anything to do with detective stuff, Return the Obra Dinn, that sort of type thing. I mean, I try to play most genres. There's some genres I don't particularly like. I'm not a big RTS fan or a big fighting game fan, but anything else I'll happily try. And I've always enjoyed first-person shooters, like throughout their various incarnations, from like Duke Nukem 3D back in the day to playing Stalker 2 at the moment. So,
what are three real quick? What are three like favorite FPS games you have?
I really loved No One Lives Forever, which is like one of those games.
Oh, Mark.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that you said that.
It's so
the
good,
first one
like,
and the second one.
I think the second one got like the level where you're like in a trailer park and like a tornado rips through. That was so cool.
Yeah, dude. I think
are
I
like
inspired Gone Home, but I could be wrong.
Really? Wow. It's so sad that these games are completely like lost to weird
I've never
publisher.
heard of this.
It was like
It's
sort
a
of
badass
James
game.
Bond, like a James Bond spoof with this female protagonist, and
Wow.
it was Monolith who do like
It's
Yeah.
Monolith, dude, who
Yeah,
make
Shadow of War.
excellent themed first-person shooters. Fear, they did. Condemned. I haven't played too much Condemned. Anyway, sorry.
I feel
Monolith's
like
awesome. I love it.
Monolith is like really underrated. Like every game they make or every new franchise is like really like different and innovative. Like Fear's got the amazing AI, and the Mordor games have got the crazy Nemesis system. They're very like thoughtful, interesting developers.
They rock, dude. Ever since Blood, they've been rocking.
Yeah, Blood was good. Yeah. So yeah, No One Lives Forever. What else? I mean, I really do like. I'm a big Call of Duty fan, which is like kind of goes against like I don't know. I feel like as
If
design,
you need a
like,
code, let me know. I got you.
yeah,
Oh,
like
no, dude. Mark, I agree, and I've got a video planned on, and I've spoken to Tina about this, like a game mode in Call of Duty that I think is one of the most innovative things I've ever seen. I was just describing it to Tina about like how much I love this and gushed over it, and how it's so underrated. And Tina was like, "Yeah, I worked on that," and sent like a picture of her working on the flowchart for it. And I was like, "Damn, this is so awesome."
I feel like it's like it's not cool to like Call of Duty as like a design person. Like it's kind of the butt of the jokes. And you know, I don't always love the single players in those games. Though some of them are very cool. I did a video once about one of the levels in the World War II game. I thought was very good. But the multiplayer, I don't know. I just find that really fun, and it's just like I can pick up like any Call of Duty game and just immediately get into it, and I'm like kind of okay at it, which is nice in a multiplayer game to be able to like get some wins. So yeah, definitely Call of Duty.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm going to go back to my roots and say Duke Nukem 3D was like the game that I should not have played at the age I played it, but certainly like opened my eyes. And I also like enjoyed the build editor where you can make your own Duke Nukem 3D levels. That was really fun.
Oh, yeah.
So that maybe
Classic engine. Yeah.
Maybe
classic
that's what
editor.
kickstarted your whole design.
Maybe, yeah.
I knew you were a modder.
Yeah, there you go.
Inspiring.
You're right. It was some modding there. Yeah.
Right on.
Right, okay. Retro Guy 200, again with 75 ZAR. Thank you so much. And says, what's next for you, Mark? Are you keen to make a 3D game? And will you do a video on different game engines?
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's going to take a long time to do a game engine.
Yeah. Like
You gotta get proficient, right? You gotta, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's taken me a long time to like learn the ins and outs of Unity. I think if there wasn't all this nonsense with Unity as a company, I would probably just stick with it because I've learned so much and I feel very proficient in it. But I'm sort of worried to keep using Unity, and I feel like it's probably a smart decision to start looking at some Godot and some Game Maker and things like that and see what else is out there. So maybe one day. In terms of like what I'm doing next, I don't know if I would ever want to do a project the size of Mind Over Magnet again, even though it's a very small project in the grand scheme of things. But it was just, there was a lot of work, and it didn't suit my mad one-track brain to work on this same project for 3 years. So I'm totally down for game jams and really short games. But maybe like in a year's time, I'll suddenly be like, you know what, it'd be nice to make another video game. So, yeah, it's time. It's just, I'm thinking I'm back, that type of thing. So
I'm imagining John Wick in the chair saying, "I'm thinking I'm back." Then it
loading
cuts
up
to his
Unity.
destroyed house. He's just loading up Unity, and he's just Google looking stuff up, tutorials and stuff, squinting at the screen, going, "Oh my! But I did that," and he types again.
Is his motivation that someone came in and moved like the gravity slider on his movement, and he's just mad pissed that someone's fucked with his?
No, somebody moved the gravity slider on his dog. They made his dog
it's on the roof.
float up into the screen, and his dog bonked his head on the ceiling and died. And he's like,
Oh my
"No,
God.
son of a bitch!"
I can't even think about that with Ludo. Oh my God, it's too much. Right, we've got a handful more. We've got Dark Jackal with $5 and says, "Been a great conversation. Thanks." Random question: played any cool board games lately?
Is that for all of us, or?
Yes, for all of us. I have one, not to chill, because we have one coming out. Red Dragon Inn is really fun. Like I just need to make sure that I'm saying the right thing, because there is a board game where by Slugfest Games, Red Dragon Inn. It's a game. It's like a drinking, not a real life drinking game, but like your characters are playing a drinking game, and you have to outdrink each other and like maintain your fortitude and also like how many drinks you're drinking. And it's extremely fun. And we have a D&D series called Adventurers Nigh, and we are partnering with Slugfest Games to make a Adventurers Nigh expansion pack for Red Dragon Inn. So yeah, not only do we have a tie-in, I also just think it's a great game. Like ignoring the fact that we have this. I think it's really fun. It's been my favorite board game to play recently.
I haven't played anything myself. What about you, Tina? Not recently. Like it's been a while since I played a board game. There's so much.
It's a
They're hard to
luxury.
set up, man.
With 2 kids under 2.
You got little
hell no.
kids.
I can't do
As
that
soon
shit.
as you put that shit on a table, all those
No.
pieces go straight into their mouths. Just
Yeah,
like, oh,
no.
great.
They're gone.
This would
Sorry.
be great to choke on.
Can't do it
You
yet,
just
yeah.
pop it.
Give me a few years. How about you, Mark?
Your own, Mark?
I'm not like I'd like to play more board games, but it's quite a difficult thing to get going if you don't have the right setup, the right people around.
yeah.
And, so I've really enjoyed stuff, but it'd be such like a noob answer of being like, oh, I like Pandemic, you know.
Pandemic's great.
That's okay. Pandemic's good. It's
that's
I know
great.
what you mean by feeling like I feel insecure when people say, "What's a board game you really liked?" And I'm like, Arkham Horror. I feel like such a scrub. But
Like werewolf.
but for one, that's fine because like Pandemic's a really well made, fun game. Like accessibility in gameplay and hardcoreness, like it's not an inherently terrible thing. Also, at least you didn't say Monopoly, right? Like there's certainly worse things that you could say.
I feel like people
board game
feel like
genre.
when they get asked this question, they need to say some obscure, like nobody's ever played it, like gem. But lo and behold, the games, the games that are doing well, are the games that people really like. Who'd have thunk it, right? All right, so 3 more. DMB Land 99 gives $5 and says, "How would you advertise a subversive game like Doki Doki Literature Club or Spec Ops: The Line without giving the game away, but still helping it find its audience?" Right? Like, well,
Marketing question.
Fuck, we need to get a marketer on here. Shit, that's a really that's a good one.
I need to. Goddamn, I've made a video with him. Why am I forgetting his? Daniel Mullins. Is it Daniel Mullins? The guy made
Pony Island, Inscription.
Pony Islands, Inscription, stuff like that, has just made it their entire thing, right? Like that is these kind of meta games that are the commentary on games as a medium. You know what you're getting into when you play a Daniel Mullins game, which is one way you can do it. But like, how do you begin that? I think just like with Doki Doki, you're effectively advertising the product as something completely different, and then the twist that it is about something else or has a different theming or touches on subjects that are kind of intense is the marketing, and you hope that snowballs. Rather than having isn't there a quirky twist like in your trailer? You need to lead into that through word of mouth. I think is the main way you do that.
Oh, go ahead, Mark. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I think it's going to be something that the audience is going to share with other people, and I think people really like it when they discover a game that's got this like twist in it. They want to go tell other people, like, you've got to play this game, but I can't tell you why. And I think that's something people like to be able to like share and promote themselves.
Yeah, for sure. All right, couple more. Snake in the Garden with €2. Thank you so much again. All most satisfying bug you eventually solved.
Ooh.
It's a tough one because there's lots of them.
I think most of my bugs were just really annoying, and it wasn't like anything particularly exciting to the problem or the solution. It was just the amount of time I spent going around in circles, and then finally figuring out the answer was just very satisfying to me. But it's not like anything the player is even going to care about.
Yeah.
All equally satisfying then.
It's difficult though, right? Because squashing bugs is great, but I think Snake in the Garden, you might be referring to bugs that are maybe a bit quirky or difficult to kind of solve. There's I can't talk too much about one of the projects I'm working on, but a lot of them are movement based for me. Like a lot of the times, game feel in movement is really difficult to lock down and to have things feel correct. So a lot of the times when there's we had a mode of transportation in the game I'm working on that was moving way faster than it should have, and the logic, it's in Unreal Engine, the logic, there was no hint for why it was doing this, and I'm sure we've all experienced bugs like this, and it took a long time for us to kind of squish that bug, but when you do it and everything's working smoothly and everything feels as you envisioned it, it's super satisfying. Super satisfying.
I did get an email from someone who had played a demo of my game and realized that if you bind the movement to the scroll wheel, to the mouse scroll wheel, you can just like rapidly scroll the mouse and it'll make the character just bypass the movement limit and just fly around the level. And I'm like, I have no idea how that's happened, but then I had to go in and put a much harder limit on it.
Oh wow,
that's intense.
Oh,
that's a fun exploit.
Games.
Yeah. They said they want to do speedrunning of the game, but they decided as a speedrunning community, they've apparently got together and decided that this would just wreck the whole thing because everyone would just be flying around the level like a rocket.
It's not very fun, right? You gotta have a little bit of exploiting, but the right amount in speedrunning, I guess.
That's great with speedrunners, right? Sometimes they'll find bugs and then put their own constraints that this breaks it too much. Let's not allow this in the any percent or 100% or whatever.
It's
That's
like
so
a
cool.
code
I love
they
speedrunning.
have.
Yeah, right. All right. Last dono, Pretty Fist with $5. Thank you so much. Says, I adore finding beauty and interesting mechanics in games that might be discarded due to sucking for reasons. What's the worst game y'all enjoy? Bad game you enjoy?
Ooh, what a fun question. And thank you, Pretty Fist, for the donation.
I mean, it's. I can't say this game sucks and I love it. Like,
I don't have any like that. There are games that I absolutely adore that I know have flaws, which is all of them. Right?
I'm checking my lists of games now.
But like,
I'm not texting.
Beyond Good and Evil is like my favorite game of all time. I could rave and have done about that game for weeks. But I also know it has some quite intense flaws with pacing and scope and mechanical bloat and stuff like that. But I go back to how that game made me feel as a kid when I played it, and how it opened my eyes to what games could be, right? And any game that people play could be that for someone, right? Could be that spark. So yeah, it just depends. Did you guys have any?
I really love the game called Red Faction Armageddon.
Oh, fuck yeah. Way to go,
I
Tina.
loved that game so much.
Yeah.
And critics were just bashing it to pieces. And I think some of the biggest criticism I saw was that it wasn't like the other Red Faction games. And I thought that was just such a sad way to just push that game to the side, because I played it beginning to end and I loved it.
I think that game had issues with a bit of like cheesy writing and cheesy story for whatever reason. Like, I think that
destroying stuff and building it back up.
But exactly, that's not the point as much. Yeah. Oh wait, Armageddon. I might be confusing it. Sorry, with the open world Armageddon, above ground. I'm on Mars.
This was a third-person shooter.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of Guerrilla. I don't know Armageddon.
I think that might be Guerrilla. Yeah.
Got you. Yeah. Okay. Never mind what I was saying. I was thinking of.
How about you, Mark? That's okay.
I don't want to like trash anyone's game, but I'd say like maybe like a guilty pleasure I have of like, I don't know if these games are good. It's just hidden object games. Like they're kind of maybe bottom of the barrel of sort of design, but I can find myself playing them sometimes and like listening to podcasts and just looking for a violin in a random image of a bunch of crap. And it's just cool. Like if anyone like a real game designer came in, I'd like turn off my screen and watch me playing hidden object games. Yeah.
When I discover, I have a friend who she likes those kinds of games, and I think I remember her showing me them, and I had a similar reaction. I'm like, is this it? What are you doing? You just fight? I don't understand. Where's the game? But there is something to it. It's like just a kind of raw, puzzly challenge, and that's fine. But I think I would agree with you that I would also maybe find it a guilty pleasure if I were really into them, because it on the surface doesn't look like that crazy complex, and it's not, but it's still fun. It's another testament to just, it's fine. Accessible things are sometimes just fun, and that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
go for it. No, I want to hear you.
I'm having trouble. I don't have my phone on me, so I can't, like, I have a list of games that I've played lately or recently or notes of whatever. But when I look at Steam and I look at all the games that I played a lot, this is not a game that I think it's the worst game, but I still enjoyed it. It's a game that I wish could have done more, and it's sad to me that it didn't, but I still really liked it. And that was PlanetSide 2. I've got almost 400 hours into it. I love FPS games. But I think, man, I want to get Matt Higbee on here someday if he's, that'd be cool. Cause I forget his role, but he was like a design lead or a creative lead or something on the project. I think it was Matt Higbee. Cause I want to talk to him about like some of the challenges there. You had this MMO FPS, this huge amount of potential, but I think what the gameplay kind of boiled down to eventually was just like battlefield in different spaces that were connected. And I wish that it hadn't turned out that way. There's still a lot of awesome stuff about that. There was the cool player coordination of like large scale outfit assaults. They weren't clans, they were outfits, which was nice. The progression sense of continent locking, where if your team did really well somewhere, you could lock a continent and then you owned it. Nobody else could fight there. But I kind of wish they took a little more inspiration from PlanetSide 1 and like created more of a logistical system with resources that you had to get from base to base. So you split it up, doing things kind of like more Foxhole does nowadays. Foxhole is like a top-down infantry-inspired. Infantry is an old top-down game. They have like an MMO design that I would appreciate more and wish they did in FPS. PlanetSide 2, I wanted that from them, but I feel like they either came up short there in their intended design, or they just compromised into a more fast arcadey style, and I wish they had done things a little differently. But it makes sense. I remember hearing an interview with Matt where he's like, I just had to convince leadership that we had to have 3 factions, which is part of PlanetSide 1 and makes the fighting on the large scale more dynamic. They wanted to just have 2. So if those are the kinds of battles and fighting that was happening, I have to anticipate that it was an uphill battle to do any sort of creative thing that was viewed as more hardcore or higher investment in a game that had to be free to play and, you know, sell monetization stuff. So
yeah, exactly. It's a tough sell, right? It's difficult when you get to that kind of scale, but also trying to still do free stuff for sure.
Not a shitty game by any means, but wish it was different.
No, for sure. I think that's for all of us. They're not bad games. It's just how we view them through what lens and such. Right. Okay. So we are through our donations, which is wonderful. Thank you everyone for those wonderful donations. We unfortunately do not have time for our improv game pitch. We're running a little bit over, unfortunately, but maybe we'll come back and do something of that sort in the future. Maybe we shall see. So before we wrap this up, Mark, is there anything you'd like to, leave with the audience? Promote maybe a little game.
You put up a video 2 hours ago too on your YouTube.
That was the final episode of developing, which is exciting.
Whoa.
Yes, it was.
Well, there we go.
It was
all right.
Yeah, I mean that was like because I've had like these 2 weird emotional highs of releasing the game and then finishing the video series, and it's been a weird thing throughout of what has actually been more important. Like, am I making a game or am I making YouTube content about this game? And so they've all been very wrapped up together. And I just hit the 10-year anniversary of Game Maker's Toolkit at basically the same time. So it's all.
Damn, dude, way to go! How do you feel?
I feel exhausted.
I can't enjoy myself. I'm too tired.
To be honest, this is the last work-related thing I'm doing for the whole year. So this is very exciting,
amazing,
and very
dude.
nice to share it with all of you. But I'm looking forward.
Yeah, thank you, dude.
Yeah, just to have a nice break and have Christmas.
Yeah, 100%. So
take the time. Be proud.
Yeah, dude. Right. So everyone in chat, all the listeners, post listeners on the pod, make sure to go check out. Well, let's be real. You already have. Go watch Mark's wonderful video on wrapping up his series, and if you haven't already, go check out Mind Over Magnet on Steam. It's a wonderful time, and also you can exercise some of the things we've spoken about. Maybe leave some reviews. Reviews are wonderful, guys. Like, if you want to support indies, reviews and wish listing are a great way of doing that. And maybe exercise your articulation in how you provide feedback and stuff like that. If you do have any, right? It's always a beautiful lesson to learn.
Mark, any last words for us?
If I may.
Oh, well, yeah.
Go ahead, Mark.
I have no last words. All I can say is thank you so much for having me. This has been a blast.
We feel great to have you. I'll fill in some quick ones. Don't be afraid to press start on your dev journey. Go to udemy.com. Check out some courses. Just open up the editor and check it out. Check out Mark's videos. Be motivated. Try to do it. That's something we also wanted to take an opportunity to talk about here, and we did. But here's it explicitly: just do it. Just fuck around a little bit in an editor, and don't be afraid of what might come.
100%. Tina, final words. Go on. Send us out.
Oh man. Like Shia LaBeouf says,
what's that
just do
thumbs
it.
down?
Did you guys see that come from?
Yeah, it's like an
Eric?
Apple thing where if you do a thumbs up, nope, not gonna do it now.
You
Of course it doesn't work
I
now.
didn't do anything, but it
for people,
it's
for
not
people
doing
can't
it now.
see, on Mark's screen.
That
people
is
are listening.
wild.
On Mark's
And
screen, after I said all that stuff, there was a big thumbs down.
Oh, look at
there's
the
some hearts.
hearts.
Okay, so you're saying your hands can trigger emojis?
It's like a thing on
Okay.
Apple, but for some reason my face triggered a thumbs down. Maybe I was just really
amazing.
glum.
It's scowling.
Yeah.
Sorry, it was really jarring. I don't know.
Yeah, I was confused.
Bring me for 6. All right, Tina.
What were you saying, Tina?
Come on.
I want to say, even if you're just improving your skills or understanding of game development by 1% every day, that's still something. No matter how big or small, take that moment, even if it's 10 minutes, 5 minutes, doesn't matter. If this is your goal, just keep moving towards it. Take that step. It doesn't matter how much of a step you take in the beginning. You just got to get that momentum.
100%.
Hell yeah.
Couldn't agree more.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
With everything everyone said here, Thank you so much, Mark, for joining us. It's been wonderful to have you. Hopefully we can work on some more stuff in the future. Thank you, Mikey and Tina, as always, and Eric in the background, our producer. We appreciate you so much. And
Thank
to
you,
all of
Eric.
wonderful viewers. Eric's the best.
Eric's the best. Thanks, Eric, for dealing with my shitty technical problems with your technical prowess and helping me. Yeah,
that your technical problems were so strange. And thank you to everyone in the chat for being here live, all your wonderful donations. That's what keeps us going here at Second Wind, not just supporting shows like DevHeads or Design Delve, but also all of the wonderful content we create. So for all of you supporting us, we massively appreciate you. And I think, yeah, that will be it. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.